Okay, go ahead, Jenny.
I was just going to say before we get going that just for everybody's information, the everything today is going to be recorded, and if you have any questions, just go ahead and put them in the chat box, and then we'll do our best to address those at the end. And then all of the PowerPoints for both us and Open Doors are going to be available as well.
Okay, so we're ready?
We're ready.
All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Betty Griffin Center for the Stalking and Human Trafficking Awareness. Why is my...
Not going?
It's not switching. I put it on.
Are you set up as a host?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
I gotta hit the wrong thing. I'm Jackie Meredith, and I am the sexual assault coordinator and a licensed mental health counselor for the Betty Griffin Center and the sexual assault program.
And I am Jenny Thousand. I am the advocacy team coordinator, and I work with Jackie with the sexual assault program.
So today we're going to go over what is stalking, human trafficking, sexual assault, domestic violence, how they all intersect, how to help victims, and BGC services. Oh, there we go. So our mission, the mission of Betty Griffin Center is to work and end domestic violence and sexual abuse. Our focus is to offer protection and quality services to victims and their children through the operation of a safe and secure shelter and outreach programs, offering assistance, counseling, and transitional support while educating the community and raising awareness. With an experienced, compassionate, and devoted staff, Betty Griffin Center offers our services at no cost to adults and children of all socioeconomic status, gender, and ethnicities. So just to tell you all that January is National Stalking Awareness Month. And with that, what is stalking? Stalking is the act or crime of willfully and repeatedly following or harassing another person in circumstances that would cause a reasonable person to fear injury or death, especially because of the expressed or implied threats. Stalking is about power and control over their victims. So let's learn some facts about stalking. Stalking is common. About 1 in 6 women and 1 in 17 men have experienced stalking in their lifetime. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 19 men have experienced stalking while in college. Stalking does start early. Nearly 54% of female victims and 41% of male victims experience stalking before the age of 25. Stalking impacts the physical and mental health of victims. Research shows stalking can lead to depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and about 68% of female and 70% of male victims experience threats of physical harm during their lifetime. Many stalkers use technologies such as cell phones, GPS, camera, spyware to monitor and track their victims. 3 in 4 women who are killed by an intimate partner have been stalked by that intimate partner. Many stalking victims are forced to protect themselves by relocating, changing their identities, changing jobs, or getting orders of protection. Stalking is a crime in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and all of the US territories. The average duration of stalking is 1.8 years. So let's talk about cyber stalking. Because we are at the age that we have handheld computers and we are on social media and we're on the web a lot, cyber stalking is huge. It's about stalking or harassment carried out over the internet. It might target individuals, groups, or even organizations and can take different forms, including slander, defamation, and threats. Cyber stalking is a crime in which the attacker harasses a victim using electronic communication, such as email or instant messaging, or messages posted to a website or a discussion group. The cyber stalker relies upon the anonymity afforded by the internet to allow them to stalk their victim without being detected. And a lot of you may know this through like Catfish show on MTV. And that kind of shows you how somebody hides behind the computer in order to stalk or to fool their victims. So now with social media, a lot of people don't know some things common things that we do that could lead to stalking. So one of them, if you directly share an image file with someone, you are also including the embedded metadata. That's called exchangeable image file format, or EXIF, EXIF, which contains metadata that describes data about the data. So there's geotagging, geolocation, GPS. It kind of tells you where, when, and where that picture was taken. It also can reveal the actual picture. So even though you edit it, say you edit out your license plate, you edited out your home address, maybe your phone number, or maybe you took a nude pic and you covered it up. There's things that can actually reveal the actual picture, and the person can get information off of that. One of those is if you watch Netflix's Don't F with Cats. That's a great example of how somebody was watching these disturbing videos and wanted to report this person putting up the videos. They looked at the video and they revealed, like, they could find little bits and pieces of where this person was actually located. And they found out that he was located in Los Angeles because of a gas station. So it's really important to watch what you post on social media. And you think it's innocent, but there could be some clues on there where somebody could pick up and could stalk you from that. Did you know that Facebook owns your photos once uploaded? They can be copied and reused by anyone because you've lost your rights to them. So you need to be very selective when you're posting to Facebook. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize is that Google keeps track of anything you look up. I learned this off the Clark Howard show, that apparently you don't have to be on that computer. You can put in this code with an IP address and it shows everything that you looked up. So if you are in a dangerous situation of domestic violence, human trafficking, sexual assault, or stalking, somebody could pull up what you're looking at, and that could put you in harm's way. And one way to avoid that is using a free web browser called DuckDuckGo, and that does not track anything that you are searching for. So let's look at stalking stats. More than 80% of survivors reported the person stalking them they knew in some way. The perpetrator is often someone the survivor is or was in a relationship with, or an acquaintance or a family member. And I know this is going to be hard to believe, but strangers count for less than 25% in stalking cases. So how does stalking intersect with sexual assault and domestic violence? Sexual assault, domestic violence, and stalking are all about power and control. All can involve physical, mental, financial, emotional abuse, and sexual abuse. All can be perpetrated by an intimate partner, spouse, acquaintance, or a friend. They all use fear, frustration, anger, and guilt, which are they all cause this, and they are normal reactions to a traumatic event. So sexual violence in the Florida legal term is rape, or sexual assault is sexual battery. Sexual battery means oral, anal, or vaginal penetration by or a union with the sexual organ of another, or the anal or vaginal penetration of another by any other object committed without your consent. So I know a lot of you are aware of the Me Too and Time's Up movement. And this was huge for survivors because they felt safe that they could report. And so for the stats for sexual assault, there's about 6 million people in the state of Florida that have suffered the effects of sexual assault. In the US, every 98 seconds, a person experiences sexual assault. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men will be raped in their lifetime or have experienced a sexual assault. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men. Oh, I just said that, I'm sorry. And I just told you about more of the victims who felt safe to report during the Me Too and Time's Up movement. Bisexual men and women are at a higher risk of sexual assault than heterosexual and homosexual men and women. So what is domestic violence? While domestic violence is not a disagreement or a marital spat or an anger management problem, domestic violence is abusive, disrespectful, and hurtful behaviors that one intimate partner chooses to use against the other partner. So the definition for the state of Florida means any assault, aggravated assault, battery, aggravated battery, sexual assault, sexual battery, stalking, aggravated stalking, kidnapping, false imprisonment, or any criminal offense resulting in physical injury or death of one family or household member by another family or household member. So domestic violence is a pattern of coercive control that one intimate partner engages in against one or more intimate partners. And I'm going to say that again. It is a pattern of coercive control that one intimate partner engages in against one or more intimate partners. These patterns of behaviors could be emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse, economical abuse, religious abuse. Domestic violence is not mutual. Two people do not engage in domestic violence. And many times you hear that. You may read that in the newspaper. You may read it in a police report. The two people engaged in domestic violence. That's not true. Domestic violence is engaged by one person, and the other person is the victim. It's about power and control over your victim. So who are the victims of domestic violence? Between 85 and 95% of victims are female with a male batterer. The other percent includes intimate partner violence in gay and lesbian relationships and men who are battered by a female partner. Approximately 15.5 million children are victims and living in a partner violent families. So domestic and sexual violence statistics in the state of Florida in 2018, the instances of domestic violence were reported statewide by law enforcement agencies, and those included murder, manslaughter, forcible rape, forcible sodomy, forcible fondling, aggravated assault, aggravated stalking, simple assault, simple stalking, threat, and intimidation. So here is the power and control wheel. And in this wheel also goes for physical and it goes for domestic violence and sexual assault. So using coercion and threats, making or carrying out threats to do something to hurt you, threatening to leave you, threatening to break up with you, threatening to commit suicide, maybe making you do illegal things because misery loves company. If I'm going to go down, you're going to go down with me. Using intimidation, making you afraid by using looks, actions, gestures, breaking your things, hurting your dog, displaying weapons, using emotional abuse, putting you down, making you feel bad about yourself, calling you names, making you think that you're crazy, playing mind games. Guilt is a huge thing. Using isolation, keeping you from being around your family, friends, things that you do, limiting your outside involvement, telling you what to wear, minimizing, denying, or blaming. Oh, I didn't hurt you. Stop being a drama queen. Shifting the responsibility from the abusive behavior and putting it on the victim. Using children, making you feel guilty about them, denying you, letting you see the children, maybe using the children to batter you by telling them to do stuff to you. Using male privilege, treating you like you're a servant, defining the lines of what a man and a woman should be in a relationship. Using economic abuse, taking money from you, hurting your job, making you get fired. These are all important things to pay attention of what's going on within your relationship. Jenny, it's all yours.
Yes, I'll take over from here. So Jackie had talked briefly before about how domestic violence and sexual assault intersect. So similar to that, both stalking and human trafficking also intersect in similar ways. Both are about power and control using the tactics Jackie just described. Both can lead to physical, mental, financial, sexual, and emotional abuse. Both can be perpetrated by somebody that the person knows. Both can use social media and the internet to learn details about the person, and both can cause that fear, frustration, anger, and guilt, which again are all normal reactions to trauma. And here's just the general definition of human trafficking. I'm just going to read it for you. Human trafficking involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. It can happen in any community, and victims can be any age, race, gender, or nationality. Traffickers use various tactics such as violence, manipulation, or false promises of well-paying jobs or romantic relationships to lure victims into trafficking situations. And here's just a general breakdown of how trafficking works. There are 3 components: action, means, purpose. Action refers to essentially how do the traffickers lure the person in, how do they recruit, transfer, they may provide for them in some way. Means refers to essentially how do they keep that person stuck. So that would be through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. And the purpose is going to be for commercial sex acts or labor services. Traffickers are always looking for people who are going to be vulnerable in some way. So they may have some kind of psychological or emotional vulnerability. They may have a substance issue or a drug addiction. They may have an economic hardship. They may be desperate for some sort of financial relief. Lack of social safety net, natural disasters, political instability. I'd also add homeless youth are at risk, especially if they're trying to run away from an abusive household, or undocumented people who are afraid of being deported. Sexual assault and human trafficking are the most underreported crimes in the United States. And there are multiple reasons why people don't want to report. They may be scared, they may know their abuser, they may be fearful that their abuser is going to retaliate against them. They may be embarrassed or feel ashamed. Reliving the trauma, when somebody reports a sexual violence or any of these cases, they have to retell their story multiple times, and that can just become extremely exhausting, as you can imagine. People are afraid of being judged. They're afraid of what others are going to say. Re-victimization. If things don't go well through the criminal justice system, a lot of times people feel like they're re-victimized that way. And again, somebody who's undocumented may not be aware of what their rights are, and so they may be afraid to report because they may think they'll be deported if they report. So why do people stay in abusive relationships? Well, they stay in abusive relationships for a lot of the same reasons people are afraid to report. Fear of some kind of violent retaliation. We know that with domestic violence situations, the most dangerous time is when the survivor is attempting to leave the situation. Shame, they may be embarrassed. They may feel like they're at fault in some way. Family, they may share children and feel like they're going to totally destroy the family if they leave the person. Finances is a really big one. The survivor may be completely financially dependent on the abuser. In human trafficking situations, the person may either be promised some kind of financial benefit, or they may be in debt to the traffickers, or made to believe that they're in debt to the traffickers. And for a lot of people who've experienced abuse, especially as children, it may just be sort of normal to them. They've never been modeled a healthy relationship. So to them, the experience is normal. What is trauma? Trauma is a deeply distressing and disturbing experience. So as you can imagine, it's if somebody discloses, you can go to the next one, Jackie, sorry. If somebody discloses that they've been through one of these experiences, it's extremely important to offer compassion, sensitivity, and empathy. You want to make sure you validate the person and ask yourself, if this were me, how would I want to be treated, and what would be helpful for me if I were to disclose my experience. I know we're really short on time, so again, you want to be supportive. You want to be careful not to be victim blaming, and you want to make sure, you can go to the next one. You want to make sure that you believe the person. That's huge. First and foremost, you need to be believing that person, and then you want to be able to give adequate resources and information for how that person can get help. Here are just a few basic warning signs to watch for. If you notice a person withdrawing, you may notice that they have disclosed the person has been abusive before, they've been sexually assaulted before, there may be visible signs of bruises or physical abuse. So there is support out there. And then if you want to go to the next one, Jackie, I'll just go through real quick what some of our services are. In the interest of time, I'm going to go kind of quick. We do have our 24-hour helpline available. We have a shelter available. We have our sexual assault recovery services, where we have our rape care unit located at Flagler Hospital. We can assist people in getting forensic exams. We have confidential counseling for both primary and secondary victims. So we do services for family and friends of victims as well. We work with children. We have transitional housing support groups. We have people in the courts who are available to assist people in applying for injunctions. We have our prevention programs, thrift shops. We have an attorney available to help people or to represent people during the injunction process. And then we also have a batter accountability specialist who meets with batters directly to make sure that they're completing the tasks assigned to them in court. And then this is just some of our numbers of the people that we helped through 2019 to 2021. So as you can see, we've served a lot of people. I'm not going to go through the numbers in the interest of time. But here is our information for where our outreach office is located. And then we also have the addresses for our 2 thrift shops. And then again, there's our 24-hour hotline. So we're always available to assist anybody in need. And then as far as human trafficking goes, resources go, we have Open Doors here with us today. And that's their information right there. But I am going to pass it along to them, and they are going to tell you a little bit about human trafficking and the services they provide.
Thank you, Jenny and Jackie. I'm just going to share my screen. Before we do our survivor panel, we're going to go over some stats in Florida regarding sexual exploitation, and I'm going to hand it off to Marie.
Sorry, I had to find the unmute button. So hi, my name is Marie Norman, and I am a regional advocate with the Open Doors Outreach Network at the Dolores Barr Weaver Policy Center. And Jenna, is your computer frozen? I'm not seeing our PowerPoint. Okay. Just a moment. So we'll start just with the federal definition of what sex trafficking is, and there may be just a little bit of overlap from what Jenny shared earlier, but I'll go ahead and share the definition. So it is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a person for the purposes of a commercial sex act, in which the commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion. We also like to note that if an individual is under the age of 18, there doesn't have to be any force, fraud, or coercion that has to occur. It would still be considered human trafficking. So those victims of sex trafficking are protected by the Safe Harbor Act, especially the minors. So groups that are, or individuals that are under the age of 18, they are protected under the Safe Harbor Act. And that was enacted in 2012. And that really just gives police officers the option to provide services instead of locking individuals up. So rather than taking a young person to the detention facility, what we would like to see is that them providing services beforehand instead of locking them up. And then as you'll see here, the third bullet says that Florida ranks 3rd in human trafficking nationwide. And so just to continue on in the same vein of stats in Florida, what we have here is from 2012 to 2020, there were approximately 12,500 investigations into human trafficking. And we know that a majority of those were for sex trafficking. And then 2016 in our local community, there have been over 231 victims of sex trafficking that have been referred to the Policy Center for Services. And what we're noticing with that is that identification of victims that are between the ages of 11 to 24 are increasing across the state of Florida. And then so again, I believe we shared this stat earlier, but just that Florida ranks third in human trafficking nationwide. And then you'll see the top 6 counties in Florida for commercial sexually exploited children. So it's important to know that this second bullet is for that group that is under the age of 18. And so you'll see Broward, Miami-Dade, and then you see Duval, which is your neighboring county to the north there at number 3. 4, 5, and 6 were Brevard, Orange, Brevard, and Palm Beach. And then so we have a couple more stats for the commercial sexually exploited children, which is the CSEC population. And so these stats are from July 2019 to June 2020. And I will kind of narrow in on Duval and St. Johns counties. But what you'll see for Duval is the number of investigations in that first column there. And as you can see, that's 86. 16 of those investigations were not substantiated, and 24 of those were verified. And then for St. John's, 5 investigations, 1 that was not substantiated, and 3 that were verified. But for those not substantiated cases, we know that the number should be a little bit higher. We know that the number of verified cases would be higher because not substantiated only means that there wasn't enough information during the process of the investigation to verify, to have the outcome of the case actually be verified. However, we do know that the number of verified cases should be higher than that, because not substantiated, again, does not mean that it doesn't happen. It just means that there's not enough evidence to verify.
So I know that Jackie earlier showed the power and control wheel. Our organization has been working on making a commercial sexual exploitation wheel to kind of show how complex the power or the sexual exploitation really is. And we're just giving honor to those who helped create this from our agency. And so this is the actual wheel. As most people know, in the middle of the power and control wheel, you see power and control. When we came up with what we wanted the heart of our wheel to be, was to really represent what trafficking can look like. So a lot of times we're asked what are the indicators I need to look for? What does it look like? How does it happen? And it's so complex that we felt like making the wheel called Complexities of Commercial Sexual Exploitation was really important to highlight and allow people to start to understand it's not a very simple answer that we can give.
The second layer that you see there, the second ring, outside of that first one that Jenna just spoke about, are practices and things that that a trafficker would do in order to hold power over their victim or individual that they are trafficking. And so some of those that are mentioned there kind of overlap with some of the ones that Jackie had mentioned earlier, but you'll see there the false promises and manipulation, the micro-regulation, which is monitoring what they wear, where they go, just always having that constant surveillance. And then you'll also see the sexual, verbal, emotional, physical violence and coercion. Oftentimes there's that isolation there where they are moved away from any type of family and friends, monetary and economic control. They also use drugs. Sometimes it's that they're introducing drugs. Sometimes it's that they are introducing drugs to a victim and then controlling them in that way, or sometimes having them to disperse drugs on their behalf so that the victim is the individual that would get in trouble. And then also using threats and intimidation, and then that constant abuse and reward cycle. So tearing them down 1 minute and then building them back up the next minute. I use that term very loosely.
Okay, and then on the outer circle describes how society plays a part in the re-victimization of exploited victims. And so we have victim blaming, being the perpetrator, the demand, media, oppression, and gender-based violence.
right, Maria, I don't know. So we're the Open Doors Outreach Network team. We help individuals between the ages of 10 to 24. We do have a 24-hour access line. Our team is mobile normally, but under the circumstances now, we're doing everything virtual. We cover the 5 counties, St. Johns, Nassau, Clay, Baker, and Duval. We do have a 24-hour access line, like I said, and that number is right there. Our team includes clinicians, survivor mentors, and regional advocates. You're going to get ready to meet 2 of our survivor mentors. Marie and I are both regional advocates. I'm also the program manager for the Open Doors team, and we have 2 LCSWs on our team as well who provide the trauma counseling. And so we're going to move into stop share. Again, like I said, you're getting ready to meet 2 of our amazing survivor mentors. Both of these women do amazing work with the individuals who we work with, but they also do a lot of work in the anti-trafficking movement. Alyssa Beck, who is a national and international speaker, has won multiple awards over the past few years. She's won the Youth Ambassador Award from the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice, the Super Kids Youth Advocacy Award from the Children's Campaign, the Gracie Award. Alyssa was also, her story was highlighted on 48 Hours, and she won a Gracie Award for the investigation that was featured on 48 Hours. And in 2019, she won the Inspiring Youth Award from the Coalition of Juvenile Justice. Chanel, and also an amazing survivor mentor and advocate in the anti-trafficking movement. She's a self-author, and she was just recognized by the Attorney General this year for the Survivor Advocate of the Year Award for Florida. So I will let them both say hi, and Chanel, tell a little bit about what survivor mentors do, and then we'll move on to the questions.
So as the role as the I'll just introduce myself again. My name is Chanel Dion. I'm originally from Texas, moved down to Jacksonville, Florida in 2018 to start my role here as a survivor mentor.
And I'll quickly say hello before Chanel gets into explaining what the survivor mentor role is. As Jenna said, my name is Alyssa Beck, and I'm a survivor mentor with the Dolores Bar Weaver Policy Center. I've been working with the Policy Center now for about 5 years, and recently, and within the last year, transitioned to the survivor mentor role. Previously, I was in an advocacy specialist role.
Back in, I believe it was 2017 when the Open Doors started opened its doors to having its first client. Before that, there was a lot of research done, focus groups. They reached out to survivors of trafficking to find out what the need was. And as a result, a lot of the responses were that a lot of the survivors felt like they failed to have someone walk alongside them in their journey who related to the experience. And so when they were in the process of, creating the Open Doors model, they created the survivor mentors role. As a survivor mentor, it just simply means that we share in the lived experience as the clients that we serve. So not only are we professionals, we also share in that lived experience. A lot of times it helps to bridge the gap in the services that we provide and the services that are out in the community, because a lot of times victims and survivors, they have a hard time making a connection with service providers, having someone walk alongside them in their journey who can assist with care management, court advocacy, and just really truly meeting the person wherever they are is basically what the survivor mentors role is. We assist on the 24 on-call role as well, and respond to a crisis when needed.
Thank you, Chanel.
You're welcome.
Get into the first question. What interactions with the community have you seen negatively and positively impact survivors of trafficking? Chanel, I'll hand it off.
You want me to go first? Okay. So for me, I feel like one of the ways that providers, I've seen the negative impact is that a lot of times there is a failure to value and understand that a lot of workers in the anti-trafficking movement sometimes lead with the power over dynamic versus a power with. So instead of allowing the victim or the survivor to have a say in their journey, a lot of the times they lead with these power over dynamics. A lot of the language and the verbiage that they are using when they speak to survivors, when they are speaking about survivors, it's negative, it's victim blaming. And as a result, it creates a friction in the relationship. So therefore, a lot of times it's hard to provide real assistance to the victim because the person that they are working with is being negative towards them in a sense. And so as a result, you know, a lot of the times I see survivors not being able to get the services and support that they need because the provider's response to them is not positive. In the positive sense, I have seen providers be more knowledgeable about how to support survivors of sexual exploitation, survivors of sexual abuse. They understand empathy. They understand allowing survivors to have a voice in their own journey. And as a result, I have seen the partnership with victims and people in the community be more positive than negative.
So for me, I've seen negative in, I think, and I'm just going to speak a little bit from my personal experience and also what I have seen before. But negatively, like I've seen, you know, victims, survivors being labeled very negative labels. And so for me, when I was escaping trafficking, I tell people all the time, like when I went through trafficking, that was a terrible thing. Like it was one of the worst experiences I went through. But when I escaped trafficking and was let down and labeled as promiscuous and a prostitute and all these negative labels, like I think that was even more traumatizing. It's almost more traumatizing than the incident itself of trafficking that I went through. And so, you know, we know labels sometimes perpetuate the cycle. And I remember in one incident where my probation officer said I was promiscuous. You know, correctional officers said I was just this prostitute. I was a child prostitute. And even though we know that that's not such a thing, at a young age, I couldn't comprehend that they were wrong and that, it wasn't possible to be a child prostitute. And so these labels are placed on me, and I see labels placed on, girls and clients that we work with now. And like, we believe those labels. We continue to live out those labels that the adults and providers put on us. And I've seen that very negatively impact people by continuing to perpetuate the cycle and allowing us to just continue to be trafficked or re-victimized by our perpetrators. And so the positive, I've seen so much positive, but I think, I talk a lot about my experience and how I was positively impacted after escaping trafficking and sexual assault. I had been let down by, I think, every single system possible. I feel like I let myself down. I blamed myself a lot because of the labels that were placed on me. But finally, when I was released from, my incarceration, I sought out help by myself. I always tell people, like, there was no guardian angel in my story that swooped down and said, hey, listen, let me come wrap my arms around you and help you. Like, I had to get the help myself. And so, I remember sitting down with my therapist and, at that point, like, I was like, we're child prostitute, all these really dirty names by society. And I told my story to my therapist, and she looked at me. She said, you're Alyssa. You're not a victim. You're not a criminal. You're not a child prostitute. You're Alyssa. And I paused for a second and was like, wow, that's something that I hadn't heard before. I didn't hear that I was Alyssa. And so that itself, like, not defining me as, what I went through, but defining me as, the person that I really was, that really positively impacted me. And I see now that gives strength to victims and survivors before too. We're more than our stories, and we're more than we went through. And sometimes, I just need to be reminded of that. And I see that really positively impacting people when we do remind them that they're more than what they went through.
Thank you, Alyssa and Chanel. What barriers have you or other trafficking survivors faced after the life? And if Alyssa, you want to start this one off?
Sure. I share this all the time, and this is based off of what I personally go through, even to this day. So as Jenna mentioned before, I've won all these amazing awards. I've been featured on 48 Hours. I was on the red carpet in Beverly Hills. Like, I'm this national advocate. But if I go to apply to live in a decent place to live, I'm more than likely told no, that I'm not allowed to live there due to my criminal record. And my criminal record is because I stood up against my trafficker and fought for my freedom. And so I have these 6 felonies on my record because of that, because of acts committed under my trafficker's control. And so I've sat down with apartment complexes, and they said, I would love to let you live here, but as soon as we put your name and your charges and everything into our database, it's going to automatically kick you out of our system and you cannot live here. And so a lot of the times, I have to go through private landlords and go to apply to live at these places. And I have to sit down and tell all my secrets. I have to sit down and tell my whole story just for them to potentially say yes, that I can live in their property. And so a barrier that I see, for myself and many other victims and survivors is gaining, safe, affordable, good housing without having to relive their story every time they try to live inside a property or a house. And so, that for sure would be my biggest barrier.
For me, I would say a majority of, so I've started doing this work back in 2018. And so since then, I would say close to half of the clients that I have served have been involved in the juvenile justice system. They've been in the foster care system. And a lot of the times, one of the barriers that I see a lot is that people sometimes struggle to properly respond to the client's needs. So it's no secret that if someone has been trafficked, they have experienced a higher level of trauma. And so as a result, we cannot control how that person is going to respond to the trauma that they have endured. And a lot of the times, instead of leading the conversation about a client or a person in that way, we choose to use words as, they're defiant, they refuse to comply, this child or this person is too hard to deal with, and as a result, their resources are limited. And so there has been many instances where we fail to find adequate placement for a child because instead of, supporting them and trying to really address the deeper level and needs for the child, we say, okay, well, we can't deal. And so a lot of the times I have had to witness and walk through witnessing a survivor have to go to a homeless shelter versus being placed in a foster home because of a checklist and a system that is out there in these systems that are supposed to protect them. And instead of protecting them, they make them more vulnerable. And so these barriers that, a lot of the times children and survivors can't control because a lot of times we're just trying to survive. And so if we don't to them, it's like if we can't manage our trauma and manage our emotions, then it limits what's available to us. And as a result, that becomes a major barrier to how we support and help survivors today.
Thank you both. Chanel, I'm going to start with you on this next one. How does the word prostitution or prostitute create challenges for trafficking survivors?
Again, that goes really back to what Alyssa spoke on about the labeling perspective. So if we utilize the term prostituted child, these all have negative connotations to them. And as a result, if someone labels you as such, a lot of the times we tend to, instead of fight against it, we may start to believe it. And if we believe it, then a lot of times what comes with someone being labeled a prostitute or being prostituted, we see them as someone who is a drug addict. We don't think of words like mother, child, friend, lover, human. And so as a result, we limit resources again to that person. And so for me, I think it's really big that we focus on shifting away from using the term prostitute, prostituted child, and we speak about what's truly going on in those situations. And it's that this person, those people that we're choosing to label as such, they're being exploited. And so these are exploited persons that we are talking in reference to. And so I think that if we, we challenge ourselves, we challenge society to do away with the terms, then we will begin to see a shift in how we respond and even see the persons that we're speaking in reference to. I know for myself, I was labeled a prostitute. I was arrested. My name was plastered. I was the woman from Texas who was a prostitute from Backpage. I was a woman who met a man, and this man trafficked me, and I was a victim of trafficking, but that wasn't the story. And so as a result, people turned their nose up at me. People didn't want to help me. People didn't want to see or take out the time to really understand the story behind the word. And so there's so much more to the story. And if we generalize people, we're hurting them, and we're continuing that cycle and pushing them further away.
Thank you, Chanel. Also, do you have anything you want to add to that one?
I really think Chanel covered it, but I do want to add, I think I think of it in like no child is, a young kid, and they wake up one day and say, hey, when I grow up, I want to be a prostitute. When I grow up, I want to be in human trafficking. Like, that isn't a thing. Nobody wishes that. And so, I think a lot of the times, that these traffickers, these Johns, these people, they prey on the vulnerabilities of victims and survivors, and use that against us and use that against victims and survivors. I think when we think about the word prostitution, it's automatically associated with choice. And so we think, if a girl or a woman is labeled as a prostitute, that it was a choice to be in this situation. And the reality is, like, there is no choice whether, it looks like it or not. We're led to this life by some sort of desperation, and people prey on that desperation. And I think about what Chanel was saying about faces being plastered all over, the news, as unfortunately that was Chanel's story. And I see it a lot still in Jacksonville, where we'll see, news stories about women being arrested for prostitution, but very suddenly we don't see the men being arrested or being plastered over the news for buying sex or for trafficking women and girls and boys. And so I think as a society that needs to be changed. I think we need to stop associating prostitution with choice and look at it as what it is, which is being these women, girls, and boys being exploited. And that needs to be addressed. And instead of being using prostitution, we need to focus more on the demand side of it and stop plastering women and plaster men and hold them accountable for their actions.
Thank you. What misconceptions do you see about the anti-trafficking movement that need to be addressed? Melissa, you want to start it?
Sure. So I think a misconception, and definitely I think it was a misconception for me, when I escaped trafficking, everybody, family and everyone, they wanted the best for me. I wanted the best for me too. And so people, try to push, therapy on me. And I see a lot of times with the people that I work with or stories that I've heard, like they push therapy onto people. And therapy is a great thing. And I think it's definitely needed. However, I think a lot of times providers and people want to get survivors and victims into therapy to address the trauma that they went through. But in reality, like when I escaped trafficking, I was just trying to learn how to survive. And so when I started going to therapy, that's all it was for me. Like, I wasn't addressing the trauma. I wasn't addressing what I went through. I was just addressing, how do I live? Like, how do I get my basic needs met? How do I live out of incarceration from people in jails? And so, that was the therapy I did. It was very surface level on how to be a human outside of my experiences. And then I think like about a year or two after receiving this therapy, I was like, okay, I'm healed, I'm good, I don't need therapy anymore. And I stopped. And so eventually I think I had a gap in that therapy. And eventually I noticed like there was things that I was going through, that I was experiencing, and things that I was remembering from my past. And it was then that I realized that I was ready to go back into therapy and really address the trauma, abuse, and neglect that I went through. And it was then that when I was ready to address that trauma, that I really got the work done and really got onto the path of, healing and learning how to cope with what I had been through. And so I think a misconception about that is, forcing people into talking about these things that they went through before they're ready, and that really further traumatizes them and really delays their healing.
So for me, I would say one of the biggest misconceptions is when when working directly with survivors and victims of trafficking, a lot of times we put the responsibility on them to self-identify. And a lot of times, just like us who are working in the anti-trafficking movement, a lot of times we have to train and become knowledgeable about what trafficking is, understanding the complexities, understanding the coercive tactics that a trafficker uses. And so a lot of the times, depending on where you meet a survivor in their journey, they may be in the immersion phase where now they're believing this lie that the trafficker is telling them. And so they may use terms as if, this is what I wanted to do, this is what I wanted, he's not forcing me to do anything. And this is all in the tactics of what the trafficker has instilled in them, has brainwashed them, has coerced them, has physically, sexually abused them into believing. And so as a provider, if we meet them at that stage, and we tend to, a lot of the times I've seen it to where they will believe that, okay, well, she's saying this is what she wants to do, so there's, nothing that I can do. There's always something that we can do. I think about for myself, I know a lot of the time when I got out of the life and escaped my trafficker, there was a point in time where I believed the lie. My trafficker used to tell me all the time that God had created me to be a hoe. And I started to believe that. And so, for me, it seemed as though I had to wear a mask. So if you have ever experienced depression, a lot of the times we don't wear it on our sleeves. We wear a mask. We go to work every day. We take care of our children, our families, our husbands. And a lot of the times people miss it. They don't see it because we're not wearing it. And so a lot of the times when you see a person that's being trafficked, they don't wear it. A lot of the girls that we work with, sometimes they still go to school, they're enrolled in school, and we don't see it because another misconception that I see is that when we do these campaigns about trafficking, we post pictures that, trafficking looks like a girl or a boy or a kid being strapped to a bed, having these ropes around their wrists, when in reality, if you were to see a trafficking victim in your community today, more than likely they're not chained to a bed. More than likely they don't walk around with handcuffs. They're not looking dingy and dirty. They're not these downtrodden pictures that we try to use to sensationalize and get a reaction from the viewers. And so when we do that, that feeds into the coercive tactics of the trafficker as well. People won't believe that you're trafficked because you don't look like that. It's not as bad as those pictures. That's not what's happening to you. And so when we do that, we're bringing more harm than good in the anti-trafficking movement as well. And so we have to be much more aware and knowledgeable about the pictures and things that we use. We have to understand that there will be a time, and it takes time for a survivor to self-identify because we have to undo the packing, we have to undo the trauma. And so we have to be patient and understand and just continue to plant those seeds of hope, and eventually it will begin to take root. it took me a couple of years to self-identify, because a lot of the times we carry shame, we carry embarrassment, we carry fear. We're fearful. My trafficker, he tried snatching me up, me and a friend, two other times after I escaped. So it's not easy just, being so willing to sit down and talk about it or tell someone what's really going on, because of that level of fear is there as well.
Thank you. And really quickly, because I know we're running out of time, but just I want you guys to briefly, because we have a lot of providers here. This work is often done in partnership with allies. How can a person become an ally, and how can allies work in partnerships with survivors? And Alyssa, if you want to.
Trying to gather my thoughts. I think a lot of times people self-identify themselves as allies because they know a lot about trafficking or have presented a few trainings. And the reality is, being an ally is much more than that. I hear a lot of times also, we're going to give voice to the voiceless, and they think that victims and survivors are voiceless, or that, we're going to bring survivors to the table. And the reality is, like, to be an ally is sometimes about stepping back and allowing survivors to use their voice and providing survivors with a platform to use their voice. The reality is that we're not voiceless. We never were. We just need that platform to use our voice, where sometimes we can't create that platform for ourselves. And also, I said something about, providing giving survivors a seat at the table. I think instead of giving survivors a seat at the table, we need to create space for survivors to have their own table. And so being an ally is about creating space for survivors to be the leaders in survivor-related things. It's great to work in partnership and let's do trainings together and, do these amazing things together. But to truly be an ally, as I said, is about stepping back and giving survivors that space and that platform to show, who they really are and how much power we really have.
Chanel, do you have anything to add?
No, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I know we're coming up on 1, so I want to respect everybody's time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Open Doors, for presenting today. We appreciate it. Kelly Franklin with Betty Griffin Center, and I think everything was super helpful for everybody to hear. And we posted in the chat contact info for our center, and Open Doors do the same. If you have any questions or you need more information, feel free to email us, or we can link you up with Open Doors. Thank you, everyone.